You know that moment when something inside you just stops? It's not dramatic, there's no big explosion, no tears, no raised voice. It's quieter than that, and somehow that makes it more terrifying. You're sitting across from someone, maybe someone you've loved for years, someone you've defended, when others criticize them, someone whose flaws you've explained away 1,000 times. They're talking, their mouth is moving, they're saying something that in any other timeline would have hurt you, would have made you want to fix it, to smooth it over, to make them understand. But this time, nothing happens. You feel nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even disappointment. Just this vast, echoing silence inside your chest where all those feelings used to live. And that's when you know. That's when you realize that the empath, the person who felt everything so deeply it sometimes felt, like drowning, has stopped caring. And here's what nobody tells you about that moment. Once it happens, there's no going back. You can't unfeel that absence. You can't resurrect care from its grave. And the person sitting across from you has no idea that they're now talking to someone fundamentally different from the person who woke up that morning. Let me take you deeper into this moment, because most people misunderstand what's actually happening here. They think the empath stopped caring because they're tired, because they need a break, because if you just give them some space, they'll come back around. No, this isn't fatigue. This isn't a temporary shutdown. This is what happens when a specific threshold gets crossed in the human psyche, a point of no return that's as real and as measurable as a bone breaking under pressure. You see, empaths don't operate like most people. Their nervous system is wired differently. They're picking up on micro-expressions, tonal shifts, energy changes that most people don't even consciously register. They're processing not just what you say, but what you mean, not just what you do, but why you do it. And they're doing this constantly, automatically, the way your lungs breathe without you thinking about it. Now imagine doing that for someone who lies. Not big lies necessarily, but those small distortions of truth. Imagine doing that for someone who manipulates, who twists situations just enough to always come out looking innocent. Imagine your entire system, your whole empathic radar, screaming at you that something is wrong while the person in front of you is saying all the right words, making all the right faces, performing care they don't actually feel. The cognitive dissonance alone is enough to fracture something inside you, but empaths don't walk away easily. That's not how they're built. They have this almost pathological need to understand, to give one more chance, to believe in the possibility of change. So they stay, they absorb the hits, they make excuses. They're going through something. They didn't mean it that way. Everyone has bad days. And with each excuse, each justification, each time they override their own internal warning system to give someone the benefit of the doubt, they're actually doing something devastating to themselves. They're teaching their own nervous system that its signals don't matter. They're training themselves to distrust the very gift that defines them. The thing about human nature that most people miss is that we're not built for unlimited emotional labor. There's a biological cost to caring, a metabolic price your body pays every time you empathize with someone's pain, every time you absorb someone's chaos, every time you hold space for someone's dysfunction. Your cortisol levels spike. Your nervous system stays activated. Your brain is literally using more glucose trying to process and manage someone else's emotional reality while they're not even managing it themselves. And you can do this for a while. Empaths have remarkable endurance. But there's a limit. There's always a limit. And that limit isn't found in your mind. It's not a conscious decision you make one day. It's a physiological shutdown that happens in your body first. Your system, in its ancient wisdom, makes an executive decision. It says this person is a threat to our survival. Not a physical threat, but something equally dangerous. An energetic black hole that takes and gives nothing back. And just like your hand would reflexively pull away from fire, your psyche pulls away from them. The care evaporates, the investment disappears, and you're left with this strange, almost disorienting clarity. Now let me tell you what happens in that moment that nobody talks about. When the empath stops caring, They don't become cold. They don't become cruel. They become terrifyingly neutral. And neutrality, real neutrality, is one of the most powerful positions you can occupy in any relationship. Because suddenly you're not playing the game anymore. You're not reacting. You're not defending. You're not explaining. You're just observing. And the person who's used to getting an emotional response from you, whether that's hurt or anger or anxious appeasement, suddenly has nothing to work with. It's like they're swinging punches at air. And this is where it gets interesting from a power dynamics perspective. The empath who stops caring becomes unpredictable in a way they never were before. Before, you could count on them to care. You could rely on their empathy as a constant. You could push them, knowing they'd bend. You could hurt them, knowing they'd forgive. You could disappear, knowing they'd still be there when you came back. But now you don't know what they'll do. And that uncertainty, that loss of control over someone's emotional response to you, that's power shifting hands in real time. Before we go further, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with yourself. How many times have you felt your care for someone dimming and you forced yourself to keep caring anyway? How many times have you noticed that you weren't getting emotional anymore when they disappointed you, and you told yourself that was wrong, that you needed to try harder, to be more understanding, to give them more chances? And how many times have you felt guilty for the simple act of protecting yourself, for pulling back your energy from someone who was draining you dry? If any of this resonates with you, if you've been in that space where you're caring for someone out of obligation rather than genuine feeling, I want you to leave a comment right now. Just write, "I've been there," that's it, 3 words. Because here's what happens when you do that. You stop carrying this alone. You see dozens, maybe hundreds of other people writing the same thing, and you realize this isn't a personal failing. This isn't you being cold or broken or damaged. This is a natural, healthy response to being taken advantage of. This is your system doing exactly what it's supposed to do, protecting you from people who see your empathy as weakness to exploit rather than a gift to honor. So go ahead, write it in the comments. I've been there. Let other people see that they're not alone in this, and let yourself feel the relief of admitting that sometimes stopping caring is the sanest thing you can do. Here's what the moment of not caring actually looks like in practice, and I want you to pay attention, because this is where most people get it wrong. They think it looks like drama. They think it looks like a big confrontation or a door slamming or a final speech where you tell someone exactly what they did and how they hurt you. But that's not it. That's not it at all. The real moment is quiet. You're in a conversation and they say something that would normally trigger you. Maybe it's a subtle dig at your choices. Maybe it's them playing victim again while conveniently forgetting how they caused the situation. Maybe it's them asking for something they have no right to ask for after everything they've put you through. And normally your empathy would kick in. You'd feel that pull to understand their perspective, to make them feel okay, to manage their emotions so things don't get uncomfortable. But this time, you feel nothing. There's no pull. There's no urge to fix it or smooth it over. You just look at them and it's like you're seeing a stranger. Not even a stranger you're curious about. A stranger you have absolutely no investment in understanding. And here's the beautiful, terrifying part. You respond, but you respond from pure logic. No emotional padding. No softening your words to protect their feelings. No elaborate explanations to make sure they don't misunderstand. You just state facts. Simple, clean, boundaried facts. No, I'm not doing that. That doesn't work for me. I don't agree with that. And then silence, no justification, no defense, no debate. Just your boundary, stated clearly. And then nothing. And they're confused. They're actually confused because this isn't how you usually operate. Usually, you give them a whole paragraph explaining your reasoning, multiple reasons why you can't do something, apologies for not being able to do it, maybe even a suggestion for how they could solve the problem themselves. But now you're giving them 3 words and silence. And that silence, That vast empty space where your emotional labor used to be, that's where they start to feel it. That's where they start to sense that something fundamental has shifted. Some of them will try to pull you back in. They'll escalate, they'll accuse you of being cold, of changing, of not being yourself. They'll try to guilt you. You used to care about me. What happened to you? And here's where you find out if you've truly stopped caring or if you're just pretending. Because if you've truly stopped, if that care has genuinely evaporated from your system, their guilt trips land on nothing. There's no hook for them to catch. You're not defensive. You're not guilty. You're just factual. People change when they're tired of being taken advantage of. Or even simpler, yes, I have changed. No apology, no explanation, just truth. Let me tell you what's happening on a deeper psychological level here, because this is where human nature gets really interesting. When the empath stops caring, they're not just withdrawing their emotional energy. They're reclaiming something much more fundamental. They're reclaiming their right to discernment. You see, true empaths have this beautiful but dangerous quality. They see potential in everyone. They see the wounded child behind the manipulative adult. They see the fear behind the anger. They see the pain behind the cruelty. And they have this belief, almost like a religion, that if they just love hard enough, care deeply enough, hold space long enough, the person will heal. The person will change. The person will finally become the version of themselves that the empath can see so clearly. But here's what that belief costs them. It costs them their ability to see people as they actually are, not as they could be. It costs them the wisdom to recognize when someone is choosing not to change, when someone is comfortable in their dysfunction, when someone actually likes having an empath around to clean up their emotional messes without requiring them to grow up. And the moment the empath stops caring is actually the moment they reclaim that discernment. It's the moment they start seeing the person in front of them not through the lens of potential, but through the lens of patterns. Not what they say, but what they do. Not who they promise to become, but who they consistently choose to be. And this is where it connects to something primal in human nature. We're tribal creatures. Our ancestors survived by being able to accurately assess who in the tribe was trustworthy and who wasn't. Who would have your back in a crisis and who would save themselves. Your nervous system is still running that same ancient software. It's constantly evaluating, is this person safe or is this person a threat? And empaths override that software all the time. They ignore the red flags. They explain away the inconsistencies. They give chance after chance after chance because their empathy is screaming louder than their survival instinct. But eventually, and this is key, eventually the survival instinct wins. It has to. Because if it doesn't, if you keep ignoring those signals, definitely, you don't just get hurt emotionally. You start to deteriorate physically. Your health declines. Your energy crashes. You become a shell of yourself. And your body, in its wisdom, will not let that happen forever. So it shuts down the empathy, not as punishment, not as failure, as protection, as the most loving thing it can do for you when you won't do it for yourself. Now here's where this gets really powerful. Once the empath has genuinely stopped caring, once that threshold has been crossed, they enter a different state of being. Some people call it detachment. Some call it indifference. But those words don't quite capture it. It's more like neutrality with teeth. It's the ability to interact with someone without any emotional charge, positive or negative. They can't hurt you because you're not invested in them anymore. They can't manipulate you because you're not hoping for anything from them. They can't guilt you because you don't feel responsible for their feelings or their life. And from this place of total neutrality, you can make decisions with a clarity that was impossible before. You can cut someone off without drama. You can walk away without explanation. You can watch them spiral without feeling the need to save them. Not because you're cruel, but because you finally understood a truth that most people never grasp. You are not responsible for another adult's emotional reality. You never were. And this is where we have to talk about the shadow side of empathy that nobody likes to discuss. Because empathy, real deep empathy, can become a dysfunction if you're not careful. It can become a way of avoiding your own life by staying overly involved in other people's lives. It can become a way of feeling needed, of feeling valuable, of feeling like you matter because look how much you care, look how much you give, look how much you sacrifice. And when your empathy is actually serving your ego in that way, when it's become part of your identity as the caring one, or the understanding one, or the person who never gives up on anyone, then stopping caring feels like dying. It feels like losing yourself. But here's the truth. That version of yourself, the one whose entire identity is built on being needed by people who don't appreciate you, that version needed to die. Not all of you. Just that part, the part that confused self-sacrifice with self-worth. The part that thought love meant tolerating disrespect. The part that believed caring for others was more important than caring for yourself. Let me give you some concrete scenarios so you can see exactly what this looks like. Imagine you have a friend who constantly vents to you about their problems. Every conversation is about their drama, their crisis, their need. You listen for hours. You give advice. You check in on them. But when you need support, when you're going through something, suddenly they're too busy, too overwhelmed, too deep in their own stuff to show up for you. For years you accept this. You tell yourself they're just going through a hard time. But then one day, they call you, launching immediately into another crisis, and you feel nothing. No sympathy, no curiosity about the details, no urge to help them process it. You just feel tired. So you say, "I can't talk right now," and you hang up. They text you immediately, "Are you okay? You never turn me down." And you look at that text and you realize they have no idea. No idea how many times you've been not okay and they weren't there. No idea how one-sided this friendship has always been. And instead of explaining it, instead of giving them a detailed breakdown of every time they've failed to reciprocate, you just write back, "I'm fine, just busy," and you put your phone down. And you don't pick it back up when they call again. Because you've stopped caring. Not in a bitter way, not in a vengeful way, just in a factual way. This relationship doesn't serve you and you're no longer willing to maintain it. Or imagine you're in a romantic relationship with someone who's emotionally unavailable. They're hot and cold. Some days they're all in, attentive and sweet, making you feel like you're the center of their world. Other days they're distant, distracted, making you feel like you're bothering them by existing. You've had the conversation a dozen times. I need consistency. I need to know where I stand with you. They promise to do better. They do better for a week, maybe two. Then it's back to the same pattern, and you've been riding this roller coaster for so long that you've forgotten what stable ground feels like. But then one day, they do that thing they always do. They pull away after a period of closeness, and you wait for the familiar anxiety to hit. You wait for the urge to text them, to ask if everything's okay, to try to pull them back. But it doesn't come. The anxiety doesn't come. Instead, you just think, "Oh, they're doing this again." And you go about your day. You don't text. You don't obsess. You don't even feel sad. And when they, finally come back around a few days later, acting like nothing happened, expecting you to just accept it as you always have, you don't. You don't accept it. You just say, "This isn't working for me anymore," and you mean it. Not as a threat, not as a tactic to get them to change, just as a fact. And whether they fight for you or let you go doesn't even matter anymore, because you've already let them go internally. That's what it looks like when an empath stops caring. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's just the quiet, immovable certainty that you're done. And the person on the receiving end of that certainty often can't believe it. They thought they had more time. They thought they could push you just a little further, take just a little more, and you'd still be there. They fundamentally misunderstood the nature of empathy. They thought it was weakness. They thought it was infinite. They thought it meant you'd never leave. But empathy without boundaries isn't empathy. It's self-destruction. And the empath who's learned that lesson, who's crossed that threshold and stopped caring, they're not going back. Not for apologies, not for promises, not for tears. They're done and done. And, for an empath, is the most final state there is. So what do you do with this information? Whether you're the empath who stopped caring, or you're recognizing that you're approaching that threshold, there's work to be done. First, you have to understand that stopping caring isn't the problem. Caring, too much for people who don't deserve it, was the problem. The solution isn't to force yourself to care again. The solution is to become more selective about who gets your care in the first place. You need to develop what I call empathic discernment. That's the ability to feel someone's pain without automatically taking responsibility for fixing it, to see someone's pattern without making excuses for it, to recognize when someone is actually trying to grow versus when they're just using you as an emotional crutch while they stay exactly the same. Second, you need to get comfortable with neutrality. Most empaths are terrified of being neutral because they equate it with being cold or uncaring. But neutrality isn't the absence of humanity. It's the presence of boundaries. It's the ability to stay centered in yourself instead of getting pulled into someone else's chaos. And from that centered place, you can actually be more helpful to people who deserve your help because you're not depleted by people who don't. Third, you need to grieve. Because even though stopping caring is often a relief, there's also loss there. Loss of who you thought that person was. Loss of what you hoped the relationship could become. Loss of the version of yourself who still believed that caring harder would eventually be enough. Let yourself feel that loss. Don't rush past it, but don't let it pull you back into old patterns either. Here's your 7-day challenge, and I want you to take this seriously because it will change your life if you actually do it. For the next 7 days, every time you're about to do something for someone out of care, pause. Just pause for 5 seconds. And in those 5 seconds, ask yourself this question. Am I doing this because I genuinely want to, and it aligns with my values? Or am I doing this because I'm afraid of how they'll react if I don't? If the answer is the second one, if you're acting from fear or obligation or guilt, don't do it. Just don't. See what happens. See if the world ends. See if the relationship crumbles. And if it does, crumble. If your refusal to overfunction is all it takes to break the relationship, then it wasn't a real relationship. It was a dynamic where you were useful, and the moment you stopped being useful, your value disappeared. And you need to know that. You need to see that clearly so you can stop investing in people who only value what you do for them, not who you actually are. Day 1, you might feel guilty. Day 3, you might feel anxious. Day 5, you might feel angry at how much you've been giving to people who give nothing back. But by day 7, you'll feel something else. You'll feel lighter. You'll feel like you can breathe. You'll feel like yourself again. Do this challenge. Document what you notice. Write it down. Because you need evidence that you can survive without being everyone's emotional support system. You need proof that you're still valuable even when you're